I call that casino thinking. You think in terms of the casino. The casino knows that so-and-so took $5 million out of the casino this weekend, but they're not going to go and slit his throat, right? They just understand that's cost of doing business. So-and-so won. He's a lucky winner. That's fine. You don't have to change your...
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders podcast.
Welcome back to the show. It's Walter here, and I've got Darren. Darren, how are you feeling today?
Very good, Walter. Nice to see you again.
Great. Well, we're going to talk about stop losses today, and I think that what will be interesting today is perhaps we'll have some different ideas, so that always makes for an interesting session. So in general, I can just say that for me, stop losses for me, I use the market. So based on what the market's done, that sort of dictates where my stop loss is going to be. So that's kind of how I approach it. So what that means, of course, is that my position sizing is going to depend on the stop loss as well. So I might have a trade where I've got a rather large position on, and then I've got another one where the stop's further away, so it's a much smaller position. And that happens all the time for me. And it's not just because I trade the weekly and the daily charts, but also because, I use support and resistance and candle formations, naked trading to set up my profits and my stops. So tell me more about how you use stops and how you approach it.
Well, yeah, this is the interesting conundrum for me, is we know that you have this approach where you adjust your position size to fit with your stop loss, so you're always risking the same amount on your trades. And then I go sort of the other way, where I treat each trade as equal and always use the same position size regardless of the size of the stop loss, because I see the trades with the bigger stop loss less likely to be hit than the ones with the small stop losses. And I'm not sure where I've got this from, because usually I take sort of ideas and then I play with them and I kind of make them my own. But this one, I don't know where it's come from, but sort of deep down inside me, I kind of believe in it massively. And it's like, so I kind of see this kind of elastic band, and on one side is your profit, and then on the other side is your actual risk. So if you kind of stretch it and risk more, then your potential profit is also more. And if you reduce your risk, then you're automatically reducing your profit as well. And it's just kind of, it's very at odds with what everyone teaches, but it kind of works for me. So the question is am I right, or is it just because it suits my personality that makes it work? Because I think about this when people ask me if I'm perhaps explaining a trading system and someone asks me this, I'm very wary of saying to them, well, look, this is what I do. Because there was a market wizard called Jimmy Baldemus, I think, who's quite famous for doing the complete opposite to everyone. And he started with a massive position, and as price went in his way, he kept taking small bits off. And then when he got to his eventual target, he had hardly any position left, and then he'd kind of reverse and go with a massive position in the other direction. So, some sort of completely out there ideas. And he said that, it just kind of felt right to him, so he did it. But he said that if anyone else did it, they'd probably blow up their account. And he wasn't trading his own money. He was working for a trading firm. He was a prop trader, and so other people were kind of letting him do this. And the question is there sort of technically one technique that is proven to be better than the other, or is something a bit more unusual that suits you personally the way to go?
Well, this is fascinating. So let me get this straight. So if you were to have a trade, so first of all, you place your stops based on what the chart tells you. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I have a technical place for placing my stop, yeah.
Got it. Okay. So then so if that place happens to be, say, 30 pips away, and then in another trade it happens to be 150 pips away, you would have a larger position on the trade that has the 150 pip stop, right?
Yeah, by 5 times.
Right, because by 5 times. Right. So there's actually a method to the madness. That's awesome. So you because it's 5 times further away.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
I mean, technically, I mean, if you were to ask a statistician, well, I'm no statistician, but I studied it a lot in graduate school, got a graduate minor, and blah blah blah. Was kind of known as being the stats guy among the psychology students, and everyone came to me with their stats questions when they didn't want to ask a professor. But having said that, I think that, the basic idea here makes sense, right? I don't think that normal distribution statistics apply to markets in general, but a lot of people do, and what they would tell you is that you are correct. So that, in other words, if your stop loss is 150 pips away in trade A, and in trade B it's 30 pips away, well, it's much more likely to be stopped out on the 30 pip stop, right? Because it's much closer, and price fluctuates closer to, on average day it fluctuates 100 pips. Of course it's more likely to hit the 30 pip stop than the 150 pip stop. And it's exactly the opposite, because most traders I know are always looking for that little tiny kangaroo tail, because they want to have more, because that little tiny kangaroo tail allows them to put the stop on the other side of the kangaroo tail, and it allows them to have a larger position. And I'm always telling people that's the wrong way to look at it, because those little tiny kangaroo tails are often, much more often in my testing, to be losers than to be winners. So from a purely statistical point of view, I would say, yeah, you'd have to be right. I mean, what do you find? Do you find that in general your trades that have a larger position and a further stop placement tend to be winners, or make money at least, more often than the ones that have a tighter stop placement?
Yeah, definitely. The wider stops work better. And it doesn't have to remain wide either. It can just be initially wide, and then when price has moved so far in your way, then it can be tightened up. And I think what people generally like to do, like you say, is because deep down they want to get rid of all of the risk really quickly. I think what really good traders do is they remove some risk rather than removing all of it. And what people tend to do is they jump the stop right up to break even. In fact, they even go and grab 2 pips into profit. I mean, like, those 2 pips are going to make any difference in the long run. And then they like to trail stops, which is the other thing which is really bad. And the interesting thing is, talking about statistics, is it's not linear. So a 10 pip stop compared to a 100 pip stop is more than 10 times worse, if that makes any sense. It's not a linear curve. So up to a certain amount, all your stops are pretty bad, actually. And then after a certain amount, they start getting better and better. And then obviously that tails off as well. Do you know Linda Raschke? Who she did a lot of according to her, it's 3 ATR is kind of the optimum. I don't know about that, but just in general, she did a lot of testing. If you had a wide enough stop, could you use random entries? And she kind of proved that you could make a lot of techniques profitable just by using a wider stop. And even timed stops, she found, could be very successful. Going on from that, the most successful version of stops she found was wider stops combined with use of trend. If you've got those two, then that's as close as she could find to you having like a real statistical edge in your trading. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people are very single-minded about stops, and they don't kind of look, outside the box on it. And it might be one of those, if you're interested in the technical side of trading, it might be one of the most important parts.
It's fascinating, really. So she was saying, so you basically say that Linda Raschke was saying that she found, if you take the trend into consideration and if you use a 3 ATR stop, that was really the way to go. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the most successful.
Right. And let me ask you this, because devil's advocate here would say, well, Darren, is that really your stop? In other words, is there a point? Let's say you've got that 150 pip stop loss on your position, but the market goes, 115 pips against you. Is there a point where you actually pull the plug, or do you steadfastly hold on to that stop loss and you don't take a smaller loss? You literally will either take the full loss or you take no loss.
Definitely never close it early. Never ever close it. If you close it, if you've watched it go against you 115 pips and then close it and see it turn around, that's just going to be absolutely devastated. And then going on from that, your next 3 trades, you're going to cock them up, definitely. If you veer off plan there, then that's going to have repercussions on your trading. Without that, it's scientifically proven that you will, if you start making those sort of mistakes, basically making an emotional, using your emotions and turning them to actions, then there is like payback down the line from that. Having said that, if you watch 150 pip stop go within 10 pips of stopping out, and then it turn around and go into profit, then you feel so good from that. You can't describe. That's better than it just going straight in your direction from entry and hitting your TP. So no, I leave them as they are, and I trade stop loss to TP, because that's the only way that's ever worked for me. Whenever I've tried anything else, making decisions based on as we go along, then I just my systems always fall apart when I do that, or I fall apart, should I say?
Right. Well, that's fascinating. So, it's sort of like being down 3 goals in a football match, right? And then all of a sudden you come back and win. In the, I don't know, how many minutes is it? 80 minutes in a soccer match, or is it more than that? How many?
90.
Is that rugby? 90, yeah, right. Okay, of course. Leave it to the American to talk about soccer. That's a big mistake. Yeah, so, I can understand where psychologically having that trade go against you 145 pips and not stopping you out, and then you end up actually making profit would be a big win. But also, is there this temptation to change your position size? Because I know you are literally changing your position size based on the trade, but let's say that you have that 150 pip stop and it's stopped out, right? However unlikely it is, it happens. And then do you find yourself looking for a trade that would fit the characteristics of a trade that has a further stop so you can actually trade more lots? But I guess it doesn't really work that way, does it? Because your take profit is directly related to your stop loss, isn't it? In terms of, like, if you have a 150 pip stop, you're probably going to have, I don't know, 350 pip target or something like that. So it means that you're not necessarily likely to make more money on the trades that have a higher position, more positions. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense, or is it? Or am I speaking out of turn here?
I think you're right. I think the way I've dealt with it, and this is just something that's worked for me personally, is I've removed any discretion from the entry. So my entry is an entry, and there's no ifs or buts about it. Okay, so there's no subjectivity or anything. It's a straightforward, simple entry, and so I've removed that decision process from the entry. The same with my stop loss. There's no discretion on it. It's the same technical point every time. So that's helped massively. The other thing that's helped is I have high frequency of entries as well. So I'm not waiting a long time for the next opportunity. I'm getting a kind of a regular supply of entries that are coming along. And then the last thing I've done is I reframe it, and I don't look at the individual trade. I've done lots of back testing, and so I think of the bigger picture. So how does it perform over 200 trades rather than this trade that I've just taken? So I just reframe the whole process into a much bigger picture. So all those kind of elements of focusing on the individual trade and the individual stop kind of melt away, and I think that's the only way I can do that really is by back testing. So I do lots of back testing, even when I know a strategy deeply. If I get a spare hour on the weekend, I'll just pull up something I don't usually trade, jump to a random month, and just start running the strategy through in my head and seeing how it performs, seeing if it's just kind of like some sort of routine to build a good habit. And then when it comes to live trading, it just, in effect, I'm trying to sort of stop me from messing the strategy up, and I've almost changed the strategy to literally lock in with me. And the technical elements are kind of secondary, really. So as long as it's a wide stop, then how wide doesn't massively matter. Obviously, there's there are limits on that. It'd have to be some sort of insane market event for it to go out of the, you know, the usual market movements. So I know it sounds pretty crazy. I think really what I'm trying to say on this is there are some really good statistical reasons for using certain types of stop, but then you can kind of model it to suit yourself as well, and you can make that work. So you don't have to follow the rule book as it's given to you or as you've read. You can play with the idea.
Absolutely. I think that's really what you've just said, Darren. I really think that's the key. I mean, to trading in just, if you had to take one rule away, I would say that's it for trading, is to mold that into something that, one, makes sense to you, and two, you can trade over the long haul, because anything else, it's just a transitory system that you're trading, you know, for a couple of months or years or whatever before you're on to the next best thing, you know. So that's really the key, I think. What's fascinating to me, though, is that you have this, you talked about it earlier, where you kind of have the big picture, you know, thinking about all of the trades, and you have so much back testing experience with the system and live trading experience with the system that you see it. You know, I call that casino thinking. You think in terms of the casino. The casino knows that so-and-so took $5 million out of the casino this weekend, but they're not going to go and slit his throat, right? They just understand that's cost of doing business. So-and-so won. He's a lucky winner. That's fine. You don't have to change your rules or change the settings on the slot machines or, you know, fire the dealer that allowed so-and-so to win $5 million at the blackjack table or whatever. But as traders, we often do that, don't we? We often change it up. So I think that's really cool, the way that you're approaching this. And what's fascinating to me is that I can see how mathematically, you could make the argument that that's really the best way to trade, isn't it? I mean, I can see where you would come to this point. Like you say, you don't have to follow the rule book, and a lot of times traders come to me and say, well, you know, the trend is your friend and I'm a trend trader, but I often ask them to double check that. I mean, are you really a trend trader? Do you really believe that when you see this chart that goes straight up, do you think it's going to keep going straight up? Because most traders don't think that way. And so I find this really interesting. It's an interesting thing certainly an interesting thing to test. So do you have a way of actually assigning a probability to a trade based on the stop loss, or do you not? You don't go that far? In other words, you say, look, this stop loss is 205 pips away. I know that with a certain amount of confidence that this is 85% likely to work out. Whereas if you have a trade that has a 39 pip stop, you say, well, this is a 50-50 proposition. Or do you not think of it that way?
No, I've completely done away with all of those figures, win rate, probabilities. I've just dumped them out of my mind, said, right, I'm not going to deal with those anymore. I'm just going to look at the profit at the end of the week. Some people think it's kind of mad, insanely risky way of dealing with it. But really, I think the only reason people want the numbers is they want just that little bit of security saying, well, it's okay, you're never going to blow up. Just keep doing what you're doing. But the numbers don't give you that. They might give you a sense of that. But what I found was the numbers actually worked the opposite way for me, because when I pored over my numbers of live trading and they didn't match the numbers that I'd already predetermined, then I started find, well, why hasn't it matched up? What have I done wrong? Maybe I need to add this indicator. Maybe I need to move do you see what I mean? And I was kind of basically trying to use the numbers to get rid of the uncertainty out of the market. Whereas now I'm just kind of saying, right, well, it is what it is. Logically, if I keep doing this, I'm going to make money. But there's always a chance that I'm going to blow up. And I think that's the same whether you've got those numbers or not. And I know we've spoke about it before. We, as human beings, find a lot of comfort in numbers. Numbers are authoritarian, and they've got real meaning because maths is numbers and banks use numbers and money is in numbers. And not only that, our whole lives now are how many followers on Facebook have you got, how many hits have you got on your website, how many, it's all number based. Now, I just think, for me personally, they do more damage than good. So I'm just kind of thinking, big picture, have I made profit this week or have I not?
I think that's fascinating, Darren, because we should do a whole session on that, actually, on what your numbers tell you, or back testing, or the idea of, numbers as a false security blanket or whatever. I think that should be something that we definitely talk about in the near future, because I think there's a whole lot there. But I think what you're talking about right now is super fascinating to me, because we know that the past doesn't really tell us what's going to happen in the future, and yet everyone uses past backtesting, past numbers to sort of project. And like you say, it's a great point, which is, if your numbers in the future or in the present, so to say, don't match up with your backtesting, you ask yourself why. What's going on here? What do I need to change? What do I need to optimize? What's the difference? And so, I think that, that's a really interesting path that we could follow, and we probably should in a future session. I think that would be really good to take a look at that, just a podcast just on that in and of itself. So I guess just to wrap up here, Darren, I think your system of money management is fascinating, and I like the idea that you use profit to determine how well you're doing. It's one of the great things about trading, isn't it? That you don't have some boss telling you that you've done a good job or not based on his subjective interpretation of your work over the last 12 months. You actually have a bottom line, don't you? I mean, as traders, we can all pull it up and say, okay, well, how did we do? And if that's really all you're basing your trading system on, that's a pretty good place to start, isn't it? To just look, what am I doing? How am I making money? Am I not making money? What's going on here? Can I keep this going?
Yeah, I think that's how, if you were a trader for a bank, they wouldn't be particularly interested in what your win rate was, or how much risk you were taking on, or if you were making profit at the end of each month, then they'd say, brilliant, you're doing well, continue doing that. I'm just trying to sort of basically question everything, really, and look a little bit deeper in it, rather than just opening the book and saying, well, okay, that's what I'm being told, I'm going to go along with it. Because I just don't think that trading is as much an exact science as people like to think. But I do want to stress that maybe my style of money management is not the best route for everyone to go down. But the two things I would say is, definitely look at slightly wider stops, especially if you use tight stops. And the second thing is, if you like to use trailing stops or move the risk off quickly, look at somehow slowing that process down, and perhaps rerun some backtests and compare the two.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know a trader who basically adjusted his system to account for essentially a pullback after he had moved into profit, and so he was really slow to move his stop loss to break even, much slower than he used to be, and that made all the difference for his system. So I think that's excellent advice. It certainly worked for him. But as you say, it's not for everyone. You need to trade sort of how you view the markets, and that's really, I think, to me, it's the key to trading is to trade how you see the markets, and not allow, we get into trading and we think, I'll just do what so-and-so does. He's really successful. I'll just copy what he does. And we quickly find out that doesn't work. Just doing, so if someone's listening to this thinking, wow, that works for Darren, I'll do that. Well, maybe. I mean, maybe if it works for you, maybe, but maybe it won't. I think there are a lot of traders that would be really tempted to pull the plug on a trade if they've got 150 pip stop loss and it goes 140 pips against you. But certainly that's not the way you trade, and it's been working for you. So I find it fascinating, and I really appreciate your time, Darren. This was an excellent examination of stops, and I think that if anything, it allows people to just sort of question what they've been told and what they've been doing, and allows them to look at it from a different angle, and perhaps that's a fruitful path for them to test.
Yeah, totally. I agree, Walter. Be more of a free thinker with your own strategy, and find something that works for you as well as the technical side of your strategy.
Great. Thanks for your time, Darren. We'll see you in the next session. Take care.
Cheers, Walter.